Thank you everyone for joining us today, and a warm welcome to the National Centre of Engineers, Glasgow branch, Scotland, to our public lecture and February general meeting. Just to start, we need to have an opening prayer, and once again, a warm welcome to everyone. My name is Dr. Stephen Ugwine, and I'm the chairman of NSC Glasgow branch. So on behalf of the ESCO and the entire members of the branch, I want to welcome everyone to our February public lecture and general meeting. Today promises to be an interesting one because we have a very strong personality here from the UK, from Scotland, who will be discussing on an important issue, decarbonization of energy systems. I wouldn't talk much on that. I will allow him to do justice to that particular topic. So, like I said, we have the first part of the program today will be a public lecture, and then thereafter we'll transition into our general meeting. So feel free to join our meeting at the end of the public lecture. New members, and if you are free to observe us, you are more than welcome to come. NSC Glasgow branch is one of the most active branches of NSC in the UK, in fact in diaspora. We pride ourselves as with the growing membership here and the support network through the initiative of the current executive members. So we have a lot of things, and one of them is what we're going to be doing today, which is more like giving you the capabilities of what we could do as a nation and as engineers here in Scotland. So without wasting much of our time, before we transition into the public lecture properly, just to give you a highlight of what is coming, we have a convention, a UK-wide convention that will be happening between the 18th to 20th of July this year at the University of Strathclyde. Which is now more like the home for a lot of Nigerian students here in the UK. We are working with Nigerian Society and the IEEE chapter of Glasgow Caledonian University. We are extending collaboration to other organizations and institutions that may work with us. So we have an open call for sponsorship and collaboration opportunities. The registration is on. The website is live. We'll share those details on the chat if you're more than free to go and check out the information on the website and how you can participate. We'll have a call for abstract. We'll be asking members to submit paper for presentation. We'll be having track sessions and a lot of things that will be happening. Also, we are going to be having professional NSC member and current registration. So feel more than free to look at our website and see how you can get involved in this important occasion. We have a lot of dignitaries that will be coming from Nigeria, and we are also hoping that we'll get a lot of companies and personality here to also come, so that opportunity for collaboration, will be created. We are looking for, knowledge exchange, technology transfer. These are the sort of things that we want to promote as a branch here in Scotland. So without wasting much of our time, I'm transitioning straight into the program of the day. The public lecture is organized within the technical team of our branch, Engineer Ikechukwu Monde and Engineer Shegun Oladiloye. Unfortunately, both of them are not here at the moment. So I'll be asking the branch secretary, general secretary, Engineer Simon Omerigwe, to please, if you can, introduce our speaker for the day. If you're here, please, Engineer Simon.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to seize this opportunity to welcome each and every one of us that are online today for this public lecture. I'll go straight to the biography of our guest lecturer for today, Professor Kurt Bell. Kurt Bell joined the University of Strathclyde in 2005, having previously worked as a researcher in Bath, Manchester, and Naples as a system development engineer in the electricity supply industry in Britain. He was appointed the Scottish Power Chair in Smart Grids in late 2013 and became one of the co-directors of the UK Energy Research Centre in 2014. And in July 2018, along with Ian Cutting, he became scientific director of the Electrical Infrastructure Research Hub, established by the University of Strathclyde with the Offshore Renewable Energy Catapult and the University of Manchester. And in April 2019, became a member of the Committee of Climate Change. He's an invited expert member of CEng Study Committee, C1, on Systems Development and Economics, a member of the Executive Board of Power Systems Computation Conference, and a member of the Executive Committee of the IET Power Academy. An innovative to promote electric power engineering as a graduate career in the as an initiative to promote electric power engineering as a graduate career in the UK. He's a chartered engineer. At different times has also advised the Scottish government, the Republic of Ireland government, and OGM and the UK Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy on Power Systems issues, as well as being active in a number of engineering research projects in collaboration with the UK government and the European industry and academic partners. I'd like to present to you Professor Kurt Bell for the public lecture on delivering a reliable decarbonized power system. You're welcome, Prof.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the introduction. Thanks especially for the invitation to join you this afternoon. Yeah, sorry, my biography, as I'm getting old, my biography gets longer, so takes a bit longer to sort of read out, but I'm very grateful for the introduction. Okay, so I hope now you can see some slides that I'm going to present just to kind of help go through the subject of delivering a reliable decarbonised power system. So as has been mentioned, I'm at the University of Strathclyde. I'm based in Glasgow in Scotland. So part of the same university that the chair of the branch is working at. I'll just say a very quick word about the university before I move on to the kind of main topic. We're very proud of being what we call the place of useful learning. The institution was first founded in 1796, I think, as a college, and then became the University of Strathclyde in 1964. So actually this year sees our sort of 50th birthday as the University of Strathclyde. And as was mentioned, I'm a member of an organisation called the Climate Change Committee, which is an independent advisor to government here in the UK, and also to the devolved administrations in Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. It was set up by an Act of Parliament in 2008, and I think it was the first such kind of independent advisor on climate change issues to be established anywhere in the world. And it's a sort of model of this sort of formal role established by Parliament as an independent advisor to government. It's a model that's being increasingly followed around the world. And particularly when giving advice on emissions reduction, but also on adaptation to climate change. As we know, it's already a thing. It will continue to happen. Even if we manage to eliminate greenhouse gas emissions overnight, there's a kind of lag built into the climate that will continue to have an impact for some years to come. And what we've been doing in terms of emissions of greenhouse gases, compare back with 1990, where a lot of our kind of statutory targets are referenced to. There's the blue line at the top there, which represents electricity supply. And it was the dominant source of greenhouse gas emissions. We burned a lot of coal to generate electricity. but that has come down dramatically, really, in the last sort of 10 to 12 years. So that now the more dominant sources of greenhouse gases are surface transport, vehicles, petrol and diesel vehicles, energy in buildings. And in the UK, we depend a lot on gas for heating our homes and other buildings. And then there's still quite a bit in industry in terms of industrial processes of emissions of CO2. Of course, greenhouse gases also, methane, natural gas is a big part of that, which is why agriculture comes into the picture significantly as well. Now, how we've managed to achieve such dramatic reductions in greenhouse gases from the production of electricity can be seen here, where that purple line represents the proportion of electrical energy generated from coal-fired power stations. It's gone down to almost nothing, actually. There's only 1 or 2 stations that are still operational, and they've kind of quite low merit. They don't get used an awful lot. They're sort of there a little bit for security of supply, I guess. And the big increase in that kind of yellow-orange line, which is low carbon sources of energy. We've had a fair amount of nuclear generation capacity, a little bit of hydro, but the growth there has really been thanks to solar power and especially wind power. There's a bit of a decline between 2000 and 2010 as some of the nuclear power stations, some of the older ones were closing. The Climate Change Committee gives its advice on emissions reduction to the government in terms of setting carbon budgets, which means to say 5-year periods of time where we look at the uses of energy in particular, but also other sources of greenhouse gases across the economy, and say, well, okay, we think our obligations as a nation internationally, in particular in more recent years in respect of the Paris Agreement, suggest we need to reduce emissions quickly. And looking at what we're already doing across the economy, where the emissions are coming from and what the costs will be of reducing emissions at different rates in different sectors, this is what we think we should be aiming at in a particular 5-year period. And the most recent period for which a target was defined a budget was defined, was the 6th carbon budget. And you can see there a pretty dramatic reduction, certainly in comparison with back in 1990, and also a lot in comparison with the first carbon budget. And associated with that, also, this was the target that was agreed, or had to be agreed under the Paris emissions agreement of a nationally determined contribution. This is where all countries coming to the COP26 in Glasgow actually should be making promises about what the emissions were going to be, a maximum level in 2030. And so, that kind of pathway from 2020 all the way through to 2050 helped to determine that nationally determined contribution, that NDC. And the big opportunity to do that has come about through, as I say, the energy system, and in particular, the electrification of end use of energy, getting rid of combustion engine vehicles, of gas heating in homes, using electricity, and then within the electricity system, producing electricity from low carbon sources. And because that seems entirely possible and actually has economic benefits, nowadays, wind power, certainly where I am in the UK, is the cheapest source of energy. So how can we make use of that? That's the goal. And we were advising as part of that 6th carbon budget that we could and should, as a nation, aim to achieve a fully decarbonised electricity system by 2035. And in October of 2021, the UK government agreed with that target and adopted it as an objective. And we can see what that objective means for the whole energy system, so not just electricity, but all sources of energy in the chart on the left-hand side, and how that blue block at the bottom increases so much. The use of gas, that orange block, declines, and of petroleum also declines. But then we start to make use of hydrogen, provided we can make the hydrogen from low carbon sources, in particular electrolysis. And the production of electricity, as you can see on the left, how is it achieved? Well, that chart in the middle shows that it's largely by what's labeled there variable renewables, wind and solar. And the use of electricity shown there on the right, with the growth of its use in buildings, in that kind of blue block, and orange represents its use in transport, in particular electric vehicles. But the question then for us as engineers working in the sector is how do we ensure that that supply of electricity using these very different technologies from what we used in the past is going to be reliable? Society depends on us. Can we make full use of low carbon electricity when it's available? And that, of course, is a function of the weather. By changing the technology, it means we're getting rid of the synchronous machines that we've used for power stations for years and years, replaced with asynchronous technologies, wind turbines, solar PV panels. Given the variability of wind and sun, can we still meet demand all year round in every hour of the year? How do we build our new kind of capital stock? What's the capacity of wind and solar such that we don't waste the energy and we can maximize the utilization of the physical assets on the system? And there's a broader question of resilience that I'll come on to as well. And I think there are 6 kind of very particular power engineering challenges. As we get rid of the synchronous generation, the inertia of the system reduces. How do we make sure that the system still operates within acceptable frequency band? The short circuit current that synchronous machines deliver. When there's a short circuit, there's a strong voltage source, the current becomes very high, and the high current is detected and helps the protection devices to realize that there is a fault, to isolate it safely. But if we're using things like wind turbines or inverters, power electronic devices, as the kind of interface between the energy source and the electricity system, they've got very strict current limits. And that short circuit current could be much lower. Will the protection devices that were designed for very different technologies still work? A lot of the generation, instead of being very large scale and connected at the kind of very highest voltages, is now, a lot of it is being connected at lower voltages within the distribution networks. And these networks were not really designed for hosting a lot of generation. And these power electronic devices used in the inverters are brilliantly flexible. We can write the control software to do anything we want with it. However, there's also the downside that we've got to know what we want to write and make sure that they interact with each other in a stable way. And that 5th point there about what they call the residual demand duration curve is about the kind of times when there's surplus renewable power and times when there's a deficit. And I'll show you that a bit more about that in a few moments. And then as we change the generation mix, the sources are in very different places from what they were when we were depending on coal-fired power stations. Have we got enough network capacity to get the power from the source to the sink? But although we have these challenges, I think we've got these great opportunities. As I mentioned already, energy from renewables has come down tremendously in price and is now the cheapest source if you think just about the kind of energy generation. You would have noticed on that first chart about the energy system, as we electrify it, the total amount of energy we need is reduced. Electrified heat and transport are much more efficient, energy efficient, than when we were using fossil fuels. When we think about charging of electric vehicles, the average vehicle is only on the road for about 5% of the time. So it's a lot of time. It could be sitting plugged in. But it doesn't need all of that time to be charged. It depends on the type of journey. Like I say, that's only an average of 95% of the time not going anywhere. But a lot of the vehicles should be plugged in. That gives us a lot of flexibility in terms of their charging, which maybe we could make use of in terms of stabilizing the electricity system as a whole. The cost of batteries has come down tremendously, and we would expect the cost of electrolyzers to come down as well. I already mentioned that these power electronic converters are tremendously flexible and give us lots of opportunities. And the information and communication technology, the whole digitalization of so many things that we do, they give enormous opportunities as well about being much smarter in the way we generate and use and coordinate electricity. Now, backing up the 6 carbon budget advice that the Climate Change Committee gave to the UK government, there was a report specifically on the power system that was published almost a year ago, actually, in March 2023, that asked this question: can we reliably get enough energy in a decarbonised power system? And the report described some quite detailed modelling showing a realistic range of technologies, of sources of electricity to meet this 2035 target of a fully decarbonised power system. And sort of gave it some stress tests by looking at historical weather data to see the variability of wind and solar and how much would be available, including periods of very low wind speeds. Could we still meet demand during those periods? And kind of one of the main enablers of that, the main means of moving a lot of energy, a lot of electrical energy from one week of the year to another week of the year is by, well, turning that energy into hydrogen, storing it, and then using the hydrogen to generate electricity. And we're quite lucky, I think, in and around the UK that we've got various, the geology is suitable for quite large scale storage of hydrogen, salt caverns in particular. And we also wanted to look at one or two of the things that were in terms of the changing climate, rising temperatures and changing weather patterns that might represent some kind of risk to the electricity system, and how we should be dealing with that. So that generation mix, as I've described, changing a lot, and you can see the kind of the purple bar at the bottom there, representing the capacity of offshore wind in particular. So yeah, we're an island nation, lots of sea. The North Sea out to the east of the UK, a lot of that is very shallow, so is ideal for the construction of wind turbines. And although some of it gets a bit far away, there's an area called Dogger Bank, which is about the size of Wales. It's sort of quite in the middle of the North Sea. It starts to get sort of 150, 200 kilometers from the shore. So there's a bit of a kind of network connection challenge there, but it's a fantastic energy resource. And using that resource would generate hundreds of terawatt hours of electricity each year. And you can see the change, both the mix of sources of electricity and the growth of the electricity system. So we're simultaneously reducing the emissions per megawatt hour of energy that we generate at the same time as growing the electricity system. But that growth is itself a massive challenge. We've never done anything like this before. Certainly not since privatization. The whole electricity supply industry in Britain was privatized in 1990. And it did trigger actually significant investment in gas-fired generation. You can see that down towards the left. But what we need to be achieving to get to the target of 50 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2030, 70 gigawatts of solar PV by 2035, is an enormous amount of investment in new generation capacity, much bigger than we've, I think, ever achieved, but certainly much bigger, more than twice the biggest annual increase since 1990. And we've got to do that every year, certainly out to 2035 and indeed beyond. So I mentioned this what I call the residual demand duration curve. I'm going to try and explain that a bit here. So if we look at the demand for electricity in each hour of the year, and when we sort those numbers from the biggest on the left to the smallest on the right, we can construct a demand duration curve. So it sort of says for how much of the time the demand is above a certain level. So you can see on the left the peak, and on the right the minimum. And the dashed lines represent those demand duration curves for 2020 and then up to 2040, when the demand for electricity is much, much bigger, thanks to electrification of heat and transport. But if in each hour we looked at the demand in that hour and we took away from it what's available from whatever wind and solar generation capacity we've got, that represents the residual demand, what's left to be met from something else other than wind and solar. And those are the solid lines. And then if you look at the green one, then it's showing some of the time we've got a massive deficit. We need to fill in that gap from something. And some of the time we've got a big surplus. So we need enough capacity, power generation capacity, to meet that peak of the residual demand, something other than just wind and solar. And over a period of time, that's the energy we need that's not from wind and solar. But on the other hand, down there, the green area is, if you like, the surplus. It's more available power from wind and solar than we can use in that single hour. So what can we do with all that surplus? How can we meet the peak at the least cost? And if we don't use all this available energy, that's certainly a cost to the developers. That's energy they can't sell, and it seems like it's a wasted resource. What's the means of kind of balancing those out? And as I said, potentially the main means we could do that is to use that green amount of energy to generate hydrogen, store it, and then use it to meet that demand in the red block. The scale of that, even if we have, say, smart charging of electric vehicles, gets up to terawatt hours. So what I'm showing on the left here, the blue line is the demand on a particular modeled day for 2030. The residual demand on that day, that happens to be quite a low wind day, is the orange line. And if we manage to smooth all that out by moving some of the use of electricity from 1 hour to another hour, and for example, electric vehicle charging, that's the green line. But we still have that total energy to be met, demand to be met, which is the area under that line, which in this particular week adds up to about 900 gigawatt hours. That flexibility of moving electric vehicle charging around is very useful to us, but it isn't the whole story. We've still got to meet all of that demand somehow. If we had a week like that, now it's getting towards 6 terawatt hours, 7 terawatt hours of energy to be found from somewhere other than wind and solar. And there's a term that I've heard used quite a lot. It's a German word, Dunkelflaute, which I think means literally the dark doldrums, when it's not very much sunlight, and it's not very much wind either. Interconnection is very helpful here, and although the UK, well, Great Britain is an island, it's becoming increasingly interconnected with other countries around Europe. There's now, I think, certainly there's 2, I think maybe even a 3rd interconnection with France. There's one to Belgium, another to Denmark has recently gone into service, one to Norway, and so on. So we can possibly exchange our surpluses and deficits, although we can't if they've got the same weather patterns at the same time. Other sources of flexibility could be useful, but it doesn't quite get to the scale of terawatt hours that we need. And even if it's not from hydrogen, there are other sources of energy that are storable. We can, it means we can turn them into electricity at the time when we need them, when it's not windy and sunny. And it still adds up to a lot from somewhere, which might be natural gas, provided we can use it with carbon capture and storage. Maybe a small amount of unabated. It means we're still letting the carbon dioxide out. It's just for security of supply, provided we keep that number very small. So in this modeling here for 2035, about 2.5% of the electrical energy production is coming from unabated natural gas. But unfortunately, that's small. If it was bigger, we'd have to reduce emissions in other parts of the economy, and that's harder. That's why we're trying to decarbonize in the electricity system first. Now, those residual demand curves lose the kind of hour-by-hour sequence of demand and generation. So the ramping, the ability to increase output from a certain source and then decrease it again, is extremely important as well. So here is a red line, which represents the residual demand, the difference between demand and what's available from wind and solar. And we can see here some low carbon dispatchable generation helping to meet it when it's a positive, and then electrolysis, generation of hydrogen that helps to use up the surplus of that renewable energy when the residual demand is negative. There's other things that help as well, imports and exports through interconnectors with our neighbors. And a small amount of what's called here grid storage, so network connected batteries and pumped hydro. Helpful, but actually on the overall scheme of things, not enormous. And all of this points to the need for flexibility. And there's various possible sources of flexible resource on an electricity system listed here. It's quite a big table with quite a lot of stuff. But the main point here, I think, is that, yes, we want things to be agile, meaning that we can change its output or change the consumption very quickly to adapt to variations in wind speeds, for example. But we think we also want it to be schedulable. It means we can choose what we want it to produce tomorrow or next week at a certain time and rely on it doing that. We can't do that with wind. We might be able to make a forecast, but we can't guarantee what it will be doing. And we want that source of energy to last for a certain period of time as well, to fill in those gaps when you might have a week or even 2 weeks of very low wind speeds. So the main point here is all these different things, which will be useful, none of them has a perfect combination of all of these features. And I mentioned already that natural gas still has some sort of role, albeit declining, but then where do we get that green energy from? Like here's the capacity of what we call here low carbon dispatchable. So it could be burning low carbon hydrogen. It could be burning natural gas with carbon capture and storage. Now we have to keep the system stable, and it's presenting already some challenges. And we've had some events on our power system in Britain, and sometimes there are people who are quite opposed to decarbonisation, who like to blame renewables for things that go wrong. So there was an incident back in 2019 when quite a lot of demand, 1.1 million electricity consumers were disconnected within just a few minutes of a disturbance on the system. I mean, it turned out there was a combined cycle gas turbine tripped at almost the same time as quite a large wind farm, triggered by a lightning strike on an overhead line, quite a sort of normal thing. But actually, there were control system errors at both of these stations. And yeah, I kind of found myself talking to the various media, newspapers and TV and radio, trying to explain what was going on. And you can see a headline there from one of the newspapers we have in Scotland, a Scotsman, saying wind power not to blame for major UK blackout, says, and they said, you know, Scots professor. I think the Scotsman like to emphasize the fact that I'm based in Scotland, which my daughter found quite amusing and posted on Facebook. Who wants to tell them that I'm not Scottish, actually, I'm actually English. I mentioned resilience, and yeah, what does that mean? We've talked about resilience quite a lot in engineering. We've talked about it in respect of climate resilience, societal resilience. For me, it means, okay, there are disturbances that are going to happen. You can't avoid kicks to a system for whatever sorts of reasons. It could be to do with the technology or the weather. We have to be able to, I think, try as much as possible to prevent adverse impacts on, in our case, energy users. And if we can't prevent those adverse impacts, at least we can limit them, we can contain them. And then we also want to be able to recover from them. So it's about prevention, containment, and recovery. And it's also across various timescales. So we've seen some oscillations of voltages on the system that have come about through some of these power electronic inverters and their controls. This is a little image from our system operator in Britain from an incident in August 2021 that shows a sort of 30-second period, that bigger box at the bottom. And those voltages, you know, normally the voltage on our highest voltage bit of the transmission network is around 400,000 volts. This was something like plus or minus 40 kV, so it's quite a big oscillation, and it seemed to come out of nowhere. And then, fortunately, after 30 seconds, it disappeared. Although half an hour later, it came again and then went away again. And it's taken the system operator many months of analysis to try and understand exactly why it happened, where it came from. Of course, the worry is that it might happen again, and it has actually happened again, and it might trigger cascades of outages, potentially in a worst case leading to a blackout of the entire system. So yeah, we need to look at the stability of the system with these various inverters, that protection will operate correctly, as I mentioned already. Here's this incident from from what, 4 years ago now, which is more to do with electromechanical stability. So it's looking over timescales of milliseconds, how the controls are interacting then. But there are also these things are a scale of minutes, which I was talking about a little while ago, about the ramping up of different resources, the need for flexibility, but also resilience against storms. Here was a picture there from a storm in Scotland from November 2021. There were, I can't remember now, something like 5,000 homes were off supply, some of them for a week or 10 days, when they're depending on electricity for their heating in the middle of winter. And then this question about where the energy comes from in the first place, and what happens if it's not windy and sunny. I mentioned we've got a lot of generation now connected into the lower voltage distribution network, and this chart shows the growth of that over the period 2011 out to 2018. Actually quite difficult to get the numbers, so a few of my students worked quite hard in digging through a number of documents to dig that out. And unfortunately, with the benefit of hindsight, we would have connected those things in a different way, put obligations on these smaller generators for monitoring and control, so that the system operator can really know what's going on and whether they represent any kind of threat to system stability or indeed an opportunity, as these resources could contribute to stabilizing the system, for example, regulation of frequency. A lot of these renewable resources, as I mentioned, are located offshore. Many of them are in the north. So here in Scotland, where I'm speaking to you from, it's a very windy place. And inevitably, of course, it's very popular for the development of wind farms, but tend to be a long way from the main demand centres, which most of them are in the south of England, especially in and around the southeast. So there's a lot of need for reinforcement of the network. And a lot of that is being done offshore, put high voltage DC cables along the seabed. And it's more construction on the network than we've done in many years, I think certainly since the 1960s. One way of looking at that kind of scale of need for network capacity, certainly on the transmission network, is to think about how many megawatts travel over how many kilometers in each hour of the year. And we can add all those up for all the hours, and we find that it adds up to sort of a few million megawatt kilometers. Now, what the blue line is showing there is how many million megawatt kilometers the electricity would travel if we had an infinite network, if it was like a copper plate. We don't have an infinite network. Some of that transfer is constrained. Some of the wind output has to be curtailed, replaced with gas generation, and that represents the orange line there. But when we look ahead to 2030 or 2035, we can see a dramatically different picture. If we had a copper plate and we could use all the resources without having to constrain anything because of network capacity, the maximum number of megawatt kilometers would be as many as 25. So yeah, 2.5 times bigger than we've got today. Already there are big plans for reinforcing the network that will facilitate a lot of that transfer, but not all of it. So there's a maximum there of about 13 million megawatt kilometers. I mean, hopefully that gives a sense of scale of how much the system is changing. The question of inertia is one that comes up a lot among power system engineers. And it's really to do with the kinetic energy that's stored in the rotating plant, the synchronous plant, where a mechanical system of rotation is tightly coupled with the alternating current on the electricity system. And what happens now is that that kinetic energy can be used to stabilize. And as we get rid of some of this synchronous plant, that kinetic energy that we can access automatically is reduced, and lets people worry about whether there's a certain minimum inertia that we should make sure we always have, or a maximum non-synchronous penetration of sources of electricity. So there were some studies done by a PhD student of mine a few years ago that showed actually we don't need to be quite so worried. One of the nice things about batteries is you can get the energy out of a battery very quickly. And so long as you can measure the need for a response, actually you can manage these variations and stabilize system frequency in the event of a loss of a large source of energy. But as it happens, the system operator is already spending a lot more money than they used to on operating the system and trying to make sure it remains stable as the generation mix changes. So, maybe focusing on that green bar where they're paying for a certain level of inertia and paying a lot more than they ever used to. Also increases in kind of what they're paying to manage voltages on the network as well. You already mentioned the control of interactions, especially between power electronic inverters, but also just between conventional synchronous plant and wind farms. So I showed you those plots on the right already. On the left, it's kind of a zooming into some of the voltage oscillations that were caused incorrectly by the responses from one of the wind farms that I said then ended up tripping during that event in 2019. I also mentioned the operation of protection on the network. So I think it's not just that the level of short circuit current is reducing, but the nature of it is changing. And it depends a lot on the specification of the inverters, whether they can deal with an unbalance between the three phases of a power system. Okay, so the last couple of slides, I'll just touch on adaptation and some of the hazards that the Climate Change Committee has identified to do with the changing weather and its impact on the power system here. So we're getting much higher temperatures in the summer. What are the thermal ratings of assets, of transformers and cables and overhead lines specified correctly? Greater risk of flooding, dry weather, was that going to impact on the cooling water for thermal power stations or for hydro plant? Not quite sure what's going to happen in terms of wind speeds. Actually, it's very difficult. We're in a kind of quite a complex place in terms of weather. But we still face hazards from snow and ice. Maybe decreasing, but they're still there. And the last thing I'll mention about all of this energy transition, there's a lot of engineering to be done, a lot of opportunities actually, but also especially there's a need for people to do all of this, to do the analysis and to deliver the investment and to operate the system. So if you've got children, nephews, nieces, friends, young people who are looking at what they want to do in a career, I think this is a fantastic career to come into, a fantastic area to come into, where you can really make a difference for the good of global society. Okay, that's the end of my talk.
Thank you very much, Professor Kate, for a very wonderful lecture you've delivered. Engineer Simon, are you around? While we're waiting for Engineer Simon, I just want to say a very big thank you. Actually got a lot from your lecture, but I would like to just give an opportunity for questions. I want this to be more like an interaction. If you have any question, please, you can raise your hands, you can unmute you, and then you can ask your question directly. Thank you. Simon.
Yeah, hello, Simon. I'm around. Okay.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. It was a nice presentation. At this time, Junction, we're going to allow the floor open for anyone that has a question or contribution or a point to say. Just kindly raise up your hands and we'll get back to you to give your questions. Thank you.
I think we have one hand from someone who's joining via, it's like a Galaxy phone.
Yeah.
Just go on, please. Go on. Yep.
Yeah. All right. Can you go on with your question, please?
Hi, Professor Kate. Godwin here, previous researcher from University of Strathclyde, currently with National Grid.
Oh, hi. How's it going?
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm fine. I hope you are fine too. Thanks for the wonderful presentation. I think there's a whole lot to exhume from all the bits around resilience and power storage and all those bits. So I think for me, looking at the current challenge with the infrastructure when it comes to battery system as it associates to EV charging, it tends to be that there is so much challenge around there. And you've mentioned that about 300 gigawatts can be gotten from battery storage through that sources. But I'm just trying to think about the fact that currently there's so much challenges around infrastructure when it comes to EV charging. So I don't know, what was your take on that? Do you think that can significantly contribute to that expected percentage in terms of power battery storage?
Yeah, I think it can. I mean, if we look at it from a sort of purely technical point of view, as you mentioned, you know, if we had all of the combustion engine cars that are in operation, if you like, or on the road in Britain today, and we had the same number of cars but all electric, with batteries about the size, you know, that they typically are today, then that adds up, I think, to about a terawatt hour of energy storage capacity. And they don't need all that energy to move around all the time. Like I say, you know, there's on average, cars are only moving about 5% of the time. Okay, there's a big variability. You know, there's taxis are on the road all the time, and you know, other cars might only get used at the weekends or whatever. Okay, but it looks like an enormous potential. And the challenge, I think, as you suggest, is how do we access that potential? So firstly, we need a good EV charging infrastructure. So it's nice if you've got a driveway, you can park your car off the road, just get a cable connected into your house. That's nice and easy. You can charge it overnight or whatever. But if you don't have a driveway and you've got to park it on the street, is there access to a charge point there? Maybe you could go to charge point if you drive to the shops, or you drive down to, I don't know, to a sports center or something, or to your workplace. Yeah, great if there was charge points there. That would work really well. But they're not so plentiful at the moment. It's still being left largely to the market to see an opportunity for commercial value from installing an EV charger. And then for the user of the EV, is there a value to them for making the energy available for vehicle to grid, or being smart in their charging? Now, being smart in their charging, there were already commercial incentives to do that. Various of the retailers will give you a flexible EV charging tariff, so you can save money by letting them use their software to do the charging at times when in the wholesale market the electricity is cheapest, which is great, and a lot of people are already starting to do that. Although I think, some of your colleagues, I guess, or maybe you've seen the National Grid in the system operator, they're already starting to see actually some problems that come along with that. The wholesale market operates in Britain on a half-hour by half-hour basis. So when the clock ticks over to the next hour or the next half hour, the price changes. And if you have some software that's controlling thousands of electric vehicles, they might suddenly all at the same instant switch on, start charging when the clock ticks over to the next price period when it's cheaper. And the system operator can already see a disturbance of that step change of demand. So there's other things to be done, I think, in kind of smoothing out some of those variations. It should be possible, but it's stuff we haven't really thought about yet.
Yeah, thanks for your thought on that, Prof. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Have we got?
All right. I want to give some more opportunity for as many that have questions. If you have questions, let us by raising up your hands. Okay, we have 2 more. All right, we're going to look at these 2. The Shafi, can you please unmute yourself and ask your question? The Shafi, can you unmute yourself and ask your question, please? Why for the Shafi? Sandra, if you are ready, you can go.
Can you hear me?
Hello.
Yeah, we can, Sandra. Go on. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. So 2 questions. Decarbonization of the power sector. So are we only looking at decarbonizing the grid itself, or the entire process from mining of the resources, the entire supply chain, production and supply chain? Are there any thoughts on that, or any actions towards that, so that we don't just decarbonize the grid, but actually carbonize the entire production and supply chain? And secondly, so engineers are busy churning out visions to decarbonize the power sector. Are there commensurate funding opportunities from the government? Because I know that when a product is first in the market, it might not come out as the cheapest, like solar. When it first came out, these prices were off the roof, but it has crashed over time. So are there policies or other intervention programs on ground that can help fast track this decarbonization? That's by maybe subsidies and other stuff like that. Thank you.
Yeah, good question. Thank you very much. So the whole supply chain, yes, absolutely. That's got to happen, actually. I mean, many countries around the world now have set targets for net zero greenhouse gas emissions, which includes everything. The net zero is an important bit, as I'm sure you know, where it's very hard to eliminate all of the emissions, but we've got the potential for negative emissions as well, maybe through, for example, afforestation, kind of through natural means, possibly also through bioenergy with carbon capture and storage, maybe starting to now people thinking about direct air capture machines to literally take the carbon dioxide out of the air, or indeed kind of minerals to kind of react with the air and over time remove some of the CO2. But anyway, yes, it's certainly true across the supply chain, in terms of the equipment manufacture, the means used for developing key materials. And yeah, there are some dependencies and some risks on key materials, for example, used in in batteries or used in permanent magnet electrical machines. So all of that has to be done in a sustainable way, and it's going to take time. It's going to take time and effort, and it's a global challenge. And the other part of your question, I think, was it was about the role of government in helping to bring down the cost of different things. And in large part, the reduction in the cost of solar PV and wind turbines over the last sort of 10, 15 years has been thanks to government intervention, I would say. So many countries have had subsidies at the beginning for renewable energy, just to get it going. And that helped to create an industry, kind of bootstrapped the industry. And then those industries, as competition has emerged globally between different manufacturers, and it's driven learning by experience, really, in terms of the manufacturing processes, the scaling up of the technology, certainly for wind turbines, leading to a scaling down of the per unit cost of energy. And so we want to pull the same trick again with other sorts of technologies. That's what's happened with batteries, with lithium-ion batteries in particular. Can we do the same thing with electrolysis? Or with, there's a lot of talk in the UK about small modular reactors, nuclear reactors. I'm not sure. I'll be interested to see how that develops. I don't honestly feel completely confident in that, but again, it's the idea is by the government gets involved at the start of an industry, helps to get it going, and then if it does it in the right way, the industry itself kind of gathers momentum and learns by doing, and then costs come down eventually. So I hope that sort of answers the question.
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you. Can Dee Shafe go on now? If you can.
Yeah.
Thank
you very much.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Prof, thank you very much for the presentation. In the course of the presentation, you mentioned that battery could be used to stabilize the system disturbance, most especially when you have frequency, probably the frequency is dropping. Could you please just give a further explanation on how that could be used to stabilize the frequency? Because I know your battery banks may have a limited output depending on the size and the number of the battery banks. If, for example, the system frequency disturbance continues, how are you able to use the battery to stabilize it to normal?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. The batteries have a finite capacity. There's an uncertainty there, actually. So you might know how many batteries there are. You might know what the power rating is of all of those batteries, but you might not know how much energy is in the battery. What's the state of charge of the battery? So if the state of charge isn't there, then as you say, you fully discharge, you end up running out of energy quite quickly. So there is a kind of a planning and scheduling thing that the system operator has to go through. And so that means they have to set up the kind of the ancillary service contract in the right way to make sure that at any moment in time, there is enough energy in the batteries. And actually what the batteries can do, I think, is they just buy you enough time to get access to other ways of stabilizing, sort of the slower sources of energy. Like if you've got pumped hydro plant, you can ramp that up within a minute or two to full output. We might still have some, thermal gas-fired generation on our system in the UK for a little while. That has a slower response. But if you've got the batteries and enough of charge in the batteries, then that you can do the discharging very quickly. That buys you time to access the sort of slower resources. And then there's another resource that's again slower that maybe kind of comes in on a scale of minutes or tens of minutes that you can use to, if you like, speed the system back up to 50 hertz again. So all of these resources in the right combination will be cheaper than bringing on extra thermal plant just to kind of get the inertia and then displacing wind or solar from the system, which seems like a not very good thing to do if the conditions are windy and sunny. So yeah, it's not simple, but it's certainly doable. And the system operator in Britain is now starting to do that and make use of batteries for sort of frequency stabilization. I don't know if that hope that helps to answer the question.
Thank you very much.
So hi, Prof. As you were speaking, something just came to my mind. So in terms of visibility, how visible is the renewable resources available to the DSOs and currently within the UK? What are they able to see in terms of making a decision on balancing the grid? based on demand.
Yeah, so I mean the resources that are transmission connected are in pretty much entirely visible, but you're right when you mention the DSO, the distribution system operator, and what's connected down there at the lower voltages. I think, you know, I showed that chart. There's about 30 gigawatts of capacity connected down there, and it's actually unfortunately very poorly monitored. I couldn't even tell you what percentage is monitored at all, but I kind of hazard a guess. I mean, you know, no more than half has real-time monitoring, and you know, so what the system operator has to, what the transmission system operator has to do is basically make an estimate of what's down there. If they know the total connected capacity and they know the weather conditions, they can use a model to say what they think is happening and how much of it is actually operating at any particular time. And they've got measurements of what's the end, you know, the power that's being transferred between transmission and distribution. They make this estimate of how much wind and solar is being generated on the distribution network, and from there they can infer what the actual demand is that's sitting underneath it. So it's quite imperfect, unfortunately. As I said in the presentation, with the benefit of hindsight, we would have actually insisted on more monitoring at the time. So other countries that are going through this transition, you know, if Nigeria, for example, is going through the transition, then do insist on the monitoring. The digital technology and the communication ought to be cheap enough. Do it in the right way. But it saves a lot of problems later on, I think.
All right, thank you. Simon, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. We just have two more guys raising their hands up. I think this will be the two last person I'm going to take. Engineer Tai Humble, can you come up with your question, please? Be fast about it.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Prof, for this thought-provoking lecture. Mine is just a quick one. I want to see what impact this might have for third world countries. You see, the transition to a decarbonized power system requires significant infrastructure investment and policy support. So I want to know what policy support will you recommend for third world countries in achieving this? Thank you.
Yeah, well, I think obviously, I mean, you're quite right. You know, there's a big challenge in terms of the finance that's available, about the cost of capital. I think the global community needs to step up. That's been a big theme of the COPs, you know, the UN FCCC climate conventions in the last few years. There's also, I think, a careful targeting that's needed. So I guess it depends on the sort of circumstances. The big cities will have one kind of need. Rural areas have quite a different need.
Thank you, sir.
I think microgrids provide a really good opportunity for a lot of the rural communities. Yeah, so I think it's got to be a mixture of sources of finance. Finance is maybe the biggest challenge.
Okay. Thank you, sir. That's okay.
All right, thank you very much, Prof. One more to go. Engineer Ademola Agoro, FNSC, can you kindly please put in your question as fast as possible?
Thank you, Prof. I just be very fast about it. I've been thinking when I listened to it's a very good presentation, but I know you are aware about the situation in Nigeria at the moment, and what has been on my mind, and I don't know how you can help in this, is the issue of on the DSO side, that a lot of investment has been put on transmission in Nigeria, which have not yielded any fruit. So, and the basic problem we have now is how can you design a system in such a way and that on the distribution service side, I'm looking at the situation that maybe in an area you have a 500 kVA transformer, and maybe the customers in that area, maybe we have about 1,000 customers. But can we build a reliable grid? I'm talking about distribution grid, talking about this decarbonization. Solar battery is not a major issue in Nigeria. The major issue is that how do you design a system that people can send their excess power to the grid, and so that in an area, even somebody can just deliver a power and you don't really need to depend on the transmission side, and you can still have a sustainable power supply.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question for the last minute or so of the session, and I think it deserves, you know, a much a longer time to sort of think about it and engage with it. But basically, I'll try to be very quick in my answer. I think the basic challenge for distribution system operators is in terms of more actively managing the system, managing it in the same way that transmission systems are operated, which is of this, making sure the balance between generation and demand is correct, and intervening to change the dispatch of generation, and if we've got flexible demand, changing that to make it all flexible, all balanced. The key to that, the difficulty with that, of course, then at the distribution level, is there's so many, thousands of different resources that need to be coordinated. However, I think there is an opportunity. The good news is that, modern communication and computing technologies ought to allow us to be able to do that in a reasonably automated way. It shouldn't just depend on kind of individual engineers in the control room making a judgment, but have powerful software-based decision support tools based on wide area monitoring to make sure all of this can be well coordinated and the limits of the individual bits of the network respected, because it's still a finite kind of network capacity. But to do exactly as you said and allow people to benefit from the small scale local energy, and to sell their own production if they've got their own solar panels, for example, into that local system. So technologically, it's becoming possible to do that, I think. And I'll just
all right, thank you.
Or I hand back.
Yeah.
Some of the technology.
Thank you very much, Prof.
I was going to do a bit of a quick plug for a company that spun out from University of Strathclyde that is developing some of that distribution management technology, a company called Smarter Grid Solutions, that is based here in Glasgow and produces some of that sort of stuff. Sorry, that was just the last bit of a quick plug for some friends here in Glasgow.
All right, then I think that will be the last from this section. But before I hand over to the chairman, I want to ask mine is not really a question, but like a directional part per se for young engineers or for engineers that will want to build specialty in the decarbonization area with the system of study today, where we encourage interdisciplinary studies. How would you advise such a young engineer to tread along a career path for energy decarbonization?
Yeah, it's a great thing to get involved, as I said, in this sector. I think it's good to as a young engineer, I think it's good to get a broad range of experience. So the opportunity to work, if you're in a big company, big companies can be good because you get an opportunity to work in different departments on different things, to be able to move between one company and another. Maybe if someone is interested in research, have spent some time in academia. For me, I've spent some time in industry and in academia, and I feel I've really benefited from it. As an academic researcher, I feel I have a much better understanding of the kind of real world problems. So I think that mixture of experience is really good. But the other thing I would say is to make sure the experience is also deep enough. To stay long enough somewhere, you can begin build up your expertise, and to try and ask questions, try and understand why something is as it is, not just kind of what you have to do, but understand why you're being asked to do that in a certain way. Maybe not to every last detail, maybe not so much you could write a textbook on it, but have a sort of a mental model of how it works and why it's being done then. And you kind of build that up over time, and never stop asking questions, I think, of your colleagues and of your sort of senior colleagues especially. And that's something I feel as well. I'm still learning all the time. So that's another thing I would encourage probably every engineer to do, actually, is to continue to ask questions.
Wow, that's so lovely, Prof. Thank you very much for the words of insight you've given us today. Thank you very much once again. At this junction, I'm going to call back the chairman, Engineer Steven, to take over proceedings.
Yeah, thank you very much, Engineer Simon, for moderating this public lecture. And I would like to say a very big thank you to everyone. We have a lot of representative of the NSC from Nigeria. We have the past president and a lot of the vice president that are here. So I would like to give opportunity to the immediate past chairman of the branch, Engineer Dr. Oluseun Adederot. Please, if you can unmute and recognize some of the important personalities we have here before we close. Thank you very much. Dr. Adediro, can you hear me? So it seems he's unable to.
Sorry, I can't hear you. I was just trying to get myself unmuted. Yeah, thanks for thank you, my chairman, Dr. Stephen Iguain. Thank you, and also to the executive of the NSC Glasgow branch and the entire member of the NSC Glasgow branch. I would like to really say big thank you to our presenter for today. The prof, that was an awesome presentation we had from you. We can't thank you enough, and we can hopefully we are also looking forward to more collaborations and also to see how we can bring you back in the future for for another phase of this kind of sorry that where Oliver Twist to be asking for that. And at this juncture, I just want to take this time to recognize the people that has been supporting us as a branch. We have two past presidents of the NSC with us today. And the first one, which I want to mention now is our engineer Ademola Olorunfemi, FNSC. And he has always been there to support us. And will you mind to unmute yourself if you want to say one or two remarks, sir? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Shem. Great job. I'm delighted. It's a great honor for me, and you guys are doing a great job. Let me congratulate the Scotland branch, Glasgow, for keeping up the flag flying. I'd like to thank Kate. That was great. And I want to believe that some of us over there and even here can work further with you to see how we can get some of these things impact in our country. I want to congratulate the branch chairman and everyone. It's a pleasure for me always. Thanks for reminding me always. It's a great pleasure. Thank you all.
Oh, thank you very much, sir. Thanks for your remarks. And also, I want to call on our very own engineer Adekunle Mokolu, FNSC, and is our very own engineer Mokolu, sir. If you want to unmute yourself, sir, for your remarks, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Hello. Yeah, I think there's a bit of network issue from your side, so we can't hear you clearly.
Let me. I was actually using AirPod.
All right.
Okay. Yeah, so I think it's better now.
Yes, that's much clearer now. Thank you.
All right. So, like I was saying, it's really a pleasure joining you because of the resource persons that you always bring to the program, and today is not an exception. I apologize that I have not been able to join the meeting and the various technical sessions in recent times. But today I enjoyed the lecture. I thank the prof for such an insight, and there are a lot of lessons that we're learning with the hope that there will be a political will to be able to actualize some of these worked examples that we are learning. So once again, thank you very much And thanks again to the chairman and the various members of the executives for holding the fort out there. All right. So thank you for your attention. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you, sir. Thanks for I want to quickly proceed to our vice president of the Nigeria, so the current serving vice president. And I know he make remarkable remarks and questions earlier on. Engineer Ademola Guru, FNSC. If you can unmute yourself, sir, for your quick remarks, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, my IPC. My past presidents have spoken. I don't have any other remark to say. So if the only thing I just say is that to thank the lecturer for, and I think anytime if you can have his contact, I hope to be in UK next week. We are looking and we were going to engage with because as you are aware, I'm the vice president for professional development, and we want to see how we can take, and I have a strong passion for power. I listened to his CV. I think there's a lot of things that he can do for us here in Nigeria. If we can work with him to do a bigger public lecture in Nigeria as related to UK experience and how to solve the power problem. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I think my chairman will note that, and I'm sure you will be able to take that discussion to another level as time goes on. And because of the time, I want to quickly just, we have Engineer Ibrahim Amadiko with us, FNSC, and also we have Engineer Alimat Adediran, FNSC with us. If you don't mind to quickly unmute yourself and say one or two things. And I also want to apologize if as you know, the time is, it's really important to us and everyone. So we will not have the opportunity to call everyone. Apologies if you've not been called, but those two people that I've mentioned just now, if you want to quickly unmute yourself and give your quick remarks. Thank you. Engineer Ibrahim Amadiko, FNSC. That's one of the national ESCO. Engineer Alimat Adediran.
Yeah, good evening. Good evening. Good evening, all of us.
We can hear you. We can hear. Good evening.
Yes, I'm Engineer Ibrahim Amadiko, National ESCO Collaboration and Linkages, Vice Chairman Collaboration and Linkages. I want to thank the presenter. Whatever to be said have been said by our past presidents, also by my vice president. I think what my vice president said is in line. So he, from the professional development, he has a lot of things to pick. We from collaboration and linkages also now key in to see how we can also collaborate with the presenter and see how we can now bring him in so that our members will benefit at home here. Thank you very much for the presentation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. And I think Engineer Alimat Adediran, she's not here anymore, but we do have Engineer Dennis Daniel, FNSC as well. So I'm not sure if Engineer Dennis is still here, but at this juncture, I'm going to transfer the line back to my chairman and Engineer Dr. Stephen Guanyi. Over to you, Chairman. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, IPC, Immediate Chairman of the branch, Engineer Dr. Lucien, FNSC. So I highly appreciate your time, everyone, for coming, especially our presenter, Professor Kate Bell, a senior colleague here at Strathclyde University. So a lot of comment. One is collaborating with you to see how we can maybe have a bigger event or public lecture for Nigeria, to cover a lot of, to reach out to a lot of Nigerian engineers. So I'm happy to initiate that. I'm also positive that this is something you may be looking forward to doing as an academic. So so I will just give you maybe a minute to say final words before we officially close the public lecture. Thank you very much. Over to you, Prof.
Well, thank you again, and thanks everyone for coming and for listening. And I'm glad it sort of seemed interesting. I think there are lots of lessons to share across different countries. I mean, the physics of an electricity system are the same everywhere. We have different resources that we might be using, but a lot of the sort of power system engineering challenges are really quite the same. So I think there's a lot of opportunities, but also a lot of opportunities for learning both, in different directions, because we start from different places, we start with different challenges. Where we're trying to get to, in broad terms, is the same. A reliable supply of clean energy that's low carbon. Brings so many kind of material benefits to society if we can achieve that. And as engineers, I think we're a crucial part of that transition, of that sharing of knowledge between different communities and different countries. I mentioned that one of the things I've been involved with, you might have heard mentioned in my biography, is a thing called CEGRE, which is CRGRE. It stands for, it's a French acronym, Conseil International des Grands Réseaux Électriques, International Council of Large Electric Systems. That exists for sharing knowledge among power engineers globally. So it's another kind of avenue, as well as a sort of bilateral contact between particular countries and particular engineering societies. So again, it's been a real pleasure to have the opportunity to speak to you all, and let's carry on the journey, I think, to a low carbon future.
All right, thank you very much. Glasgow Branch will be more than happy to be able to create these opportunities. We have a conference coming up this year. 18th to 20th of July is a UK-wide convention. We have a lot of opportunities for people to come and speak about their latest challenges or latest innovations and how that can be useful to us as a people. The website is live right now, so feel free to register as quick as possible. We'll be able to issue you something to apply for your visas. To if you start the process earlier, then that'll be better. Just a minute before we close, can I hand back to the IPC engineer Olusegun? Wanted to say something quickly.
Oh, thank you so much, my chairman. So I think I mean some people not recognizing some of our national schools, and I want to apologize, and this is a sincere apology if I missed you. I want to quickly point on our national school, engineer Agbiji FNSC. Is one of our national schools. It's also the professional development, part of the professional development board. Engineer Agbiji, do you want to unmute yourself and quickly make your remarks? Thank you.
It's a great pleasure, my chairman, the IPC, the guest presenter. Our past presidents have spoken a lot, but I want to quickly thank the Glasgow branch for putting together this all-important public lecture that discusses a subject that hinges on the economy of Nigeria. We all know that renewable energy is a major challenge in Nigeria as we speak. The national grid has collapsed a number of times. So this public lecture is apt, and like the chairman, my chairman of the Professional Development Board, have said, Engineer Guru, I'm his vice chairman. We'd like to work closely with Glasgow branch to bring on board innovative thinking on how to improve on our energy systems. So while thanking the entire branch leadership for putting this together, we'd like to encourage you to do more. We are proud of you. Keep the flag of the Nigerian Society of Engineers flying very high, and we trust that we'll be with you shortly, like my chairman has said. Once again, thank you and congratulations.
All right, thank you. Yeah, thank you, sir. Apologies if I have not mentioned your name. You are all recognized, and we thank you for joining us, even if you can stay as we transit to our proper meeting. That would be appreciated. Thank you. Over to you, chairman. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And just to say that the president of NSC is the chief host of this occasion. Unfortunately, she's not here. Engineer Mrs. Margaret Oguntala of NSC. She's always a very big supporter of our branch. She's not here. I'm hopeful that during our convention, probably, hopefully, Engineer Kurt will be able to attend. We are hoping that it will be an opportunity to discuss a whole lot of topical issues for Nigeria economy. So thank you, everyone, and feel free to stay back to join our monthly meeting, the February meeting.